All right. Yes. Thank you for your patience. I actually drove over to Fort Lauderdale today to grab some of my family's things because I sent my wife and my 8-month-old baby to the East Coast when the hurricane came in. I stayed in Bokeelia, and it was exactly like the news made it out to be. We have 6 figures of damage on our house, and we had a storm surge come into the bottom of the animal rooms. It blew out a whole wall of our reptile rooms downstairs. I tried to get some pictures uploaded, but the day got away from me real quick. It takes a long time to get back on the island because they're doing a lot of construction, a lot of work out here. So thank you for your patience with me coming a little bit late to this. So I run an exotic animal rescue. I have 2 different organizations. I have Adam's Animal Encounters, which is an LLC I started a few years ago. And then I also, about 3 months ago, I started Adam's Animal Rescue and Sanctuary, which is a 501c3 federally approved nonprofit. So on the first page, if you went to our website, we do have an area if you wanted to make any donations to us, especially after Ian. We're struggling out here, but you help just by being here, watching these virtual programs. So we're gonna have a slight alteration of the program today. We're not gonna focus just on the Florida reptiles. We're gonna talk about reptiles and some very unique adaptations. I do have a handful of native Florida reptiles with me as well. I am a native Floridian, born and raised, been here my whole life. I'm probably the rarest animal that I have right now. And I love Florida. I love educating. I love animals, and I found a unique way to rescue animals, take them in from different situations, whether invasive species from the wild, a lot of surrendered pets. Kids rush into these things, think they're a good idea. And although we have about 150 animals, over 50 different species, they don't make good pets. You know, snakes don't make good pets, lizards, things like that. And before we get into the individual animals, we'll talk about it in some of the slides today with the unique adaptations. So if you want to go to the second slide there, where are we at here? Yeah, so those are some of the reptiles we'll talk about today. You can go to the third slide there for me. Awesome. All right, so before we go into adaptations and the reptiles and the unique things that they have, really it's important to know that the reason that they're adapted is because of this thing called ecology. Not only do they have to adapt for other animals being around them, but they're going to have to adapt for plants, for abiotic factors, temperature. Next week, although a lot of the people without power, we've been without power for about 2 weeks now, a lot of people out here are very excited for the cold front to come in. I myself am not, because I'm going to have to heat all of the animals. So that's a non-living factor that they have to compete with. So a lot of competition in the ecosystems that they live in end up forming these adaptations. So if you want to go to the fourth one there. And just really quick, again, kind of going over ecology, because we'll talk about the adaptations in depth today, is there's really going to be one factor that's going to limit a carrying capacity. There's only so many alligators that the Everglades can hold due to space more. It's not going to be a food factor for them. Water can limit the population. Other animals from competition can limit the population. There's lots of different things that can cause ecosystems to reach their carrying capacity, and it's always going to be competition with other animals and other limiting factors. So we go to the fifth one there. So those are the different limiting factors that I just kind of mentioned. Remember, only one factor at a time. I did take that picture right there down in Shark Valley in the Everglades. It's a great tram tour, and they have a great bike ride as well. That looks to be like a peninsula cooter that our Native American alligator is eating, of course, constantly competing with one another. Florida turtles, I might mention this again later, grow very, very fast compared to a lot of other turtles found throughout the world. And it's said that they need to grow as fast as they can so they can get larger than the alligators can fit inside of their mouths. And that one right there, eventually, after about an hour and a half, did end up crunching down that turtle shell right there. Go to the next slide. And I know I'm flying through the slides right now. I'll go a little slower when I have the animals in my hands. But this is basically what's going to happen when animals are in competition with another. There's always going to be population fluctuations. And if you look at the screen, you'll be able to see that they slowly they lag behind. So you end up having the rabbits, their population goes a lot higher, the hares, and then you end up having your fox population creep up afterwards. When the fox population creeps up afterwards, eventually the rabbit population is going to go down. Without enough rabbits to eat, the fox population is going to go down. These animals that are in the main competition with one another are constantly adapting to one another. It's not a coincidence that one of the fastest land animals on Earth, the cheetah, eats the gazelles, also one of the fastest land animals on Earth. They're constantly adapting to one another. Let's see, I think we've got, go to the next slide here. So just because we're talking about reptiles today, just some brief taxonomy about them. And I won't go through and read each thing off of this screen. I was never a big fan of when my professors did that. So feel free to read through on your own and see some of the things about reptiles. But we're going to be talking about reptiles today. Snakes, lizards, turtles, alligators, things like that. There's multiple classes of animals. We're in the class of mammals, mammalia. There's aves, which is birds, although I think they're going to end up putting them in the reptile class here soon enough. You have amphibians in a different class, and I'm just naming the backboned animals, even though 97% of animals on Earth are invertebrates. So we always focus on the larger, the macrofauna, we call them, the bigger, large animals, but a lot of the animals on Earth are a lot smaller. 20% of animals on Earth are actually beetles. Fun fact, right? So I want to go to the next slide here. We've got additional reptile info. So reptiles, I kind of call them a see you later bye animal. They have a lot of babies and then they see you later bye and they leave them. Pretty much all reptiles except for crocodilians don't really offer much parental care. So one of the adaptations that they have is they have lots and lots and lots of babies. And a sea turtle can't really defend their nest against a raccoon trying to dig it up and eat the babies. Their energy is better spent going off and finding more food, so more energy, and then reproducing, so on and so forth the next year. This is also one of the reasons, this chart right here, of why these animals don't make good pets. There is no parental care. So trying to love on them and be around them, like a lot of people try to do with exotic animals, is very, very unnatural to them. If you're a snake that allowed yourself to get picked up in the wild by a large animal, you died. That large animal ate you. Humans are, we'll say, unique, I guess. I'll say it to you all, we're very weird animals. We're very strange, and we'll pick up a snake with no intent to harm it, and we'll just kind of let it go on its own. But the snakes over time, all reptiles over time, they haven't adapted for that. So they're solitary animals. You don't like being around large animals. That's how they're adapted to be, which is why we have so many surrendered pets here at our rescue. So let's get into the first one, snakes. So we're going to go into the different kind of orders of the reptiles. We've got snakes, lizards, all right, that's one group, turtles, tortoises. I'll talk about crocodilians, and I'll talk about the general characteristics first here. Those are all snakes that we have here at our rescue. They're all going to be limbless, of course. They say that's going to be for getting down in burrows when they were hunting rodents. Lots of teeth. One of my favorite adaptations of a snake is their Jacobson organ. You can see the kind of image right there in the middle, shows where the Jacobson organ would be on the roof of their mouth. All of the snakes are going to have the Jacobson organ. A lot of lizards also have the Jacobson organ, not all of them. And that's how they're going to essentially smell. So they stick out that forked tongue. Each side of that fork is going to collect molecules from the air of what they're smelling, whether it's a predator they're trying to avoid or a prey they're trying to find. They'll stick out that tongue, they'll pull it in their mouth, stick it in the two holes, and those two holes will tell their brain which direction the smell is coming from. And then there's some other snakes that will also have further adaptations, like we'll talk about with pythons in the beginning, and allow them to hunt a little bit better as well. They can swallow very large prey. Kind of hard to make out from the picture, but we did feed in the bottom corner, that ball python. We did just feed it a pretty large meal. They could eat meals about 2 times the thickest part of their body, which is very large, or the equivalent of about 10 times the size of their head. And when I say that, when I'm in classrooms, I walk over to one of the very large bins that I bring the animals in, and I pick it up and I say, imagine if I swallowed this in one bite. And that clicks with the kids really, really well. And then after they eat, they can sleep for a very long time, days, weeks, months, and just digest that meal. This is also one of the places I find a lot of people not caring for their snakes in a overfeeding way. A lot of the literature will say feed snakes once a week, and it's going to depend on which snake, things like that. That snake is going to capitalize on every meal that it can come across. That's naturally what they're adapted to do. More food, more energy reproducing. So putting a rodent in front of that snake continuously, they're going to eat it and eat it and eat it to the point that they're obese. And just like, humans being obese, you're going to have a shorter lifespan. Other medical issues can come from it as well. So those are some things that you should, when you get exotic animals, I tell the kids, you have to think about their natural history, not what some of the literature will tell you, how they're adapted in the wild. Part of the year when it gets cooler, snakes just won't eat. And if you're continuing to try to feed them and maybe their body shuts down, it can kind of rot inside of them. So a lot of these adaptations that these animals have, they work against them when people try to make them our pet. Dogs are good pets, but we've been, habituating them for hundreds, thousands of years. And that's why they make better pets than a lot of these exotics. All right, let's go to that next slide there. Which one we have? The ball pythons here. So ball pythons, so they are related to a Burmese python that we do have in the Everglades. We have lots of those pythons in the Everglades. I have caught a few of them myself down there. But first, you should know that python is a family. It's Pythonidae is the name of the family. And if you were to give an equivalent family to that, you can say something like Felidae. Felidae is a family of mammals, in the order carnivores. Your house cat, I'm sure some of you have house cats, you know somebody that has a house cat. Your house cat is in the Felidae family, and so is a Florida panther, 150 pounds. You don't compare a 150-pound panther to your house cat, really. So some of these pythons that you see in stores that only grow 4 to 6 feet long, they're not 20-foot long snakes that are in the Everglades. The ball pythons, they're from drier grasslands in Africa, and they actually don't survive too well in the very humid environments that we have out there. So although, yes, they are both pythons, they're not all created equal. A 600-pound tiger is also in the Felidae family compared to your house cat. So just note, not all pythons are exactly the same. There's actually the pygmy python only gets to be, I think, about 20 inches long, somewhere in that range. But some of the adaptations that they do share, and one of my favorites, and I have some good pictures on there of it, are heat sensing pits. So across the upper lip of that snake, they have a lot of holes, and those sense warmth from larger animals like predators that they're trying to get away from. But it's really an adaptation, they say, to help them find their prey. So they're going to go in the wild, they're going to use that Jacobson organ, they're going to smell the air, they're going to taste, they're going to try to find the rodents. A lot of pythons, ball pythons, are known to eat birds, warm-blooded animals. They're going to use that Jacobson organ to get close. They're going to look for movement, and they're also going to look for heat crossing across their face. I don't know if it's one of the pictures on the slides or not, but one of our friendliest snakes, if you go to our website, and you'd see that snake sitting around 5-year-old kids' necks at their birthdays. I trust that snake wholeheartedly. I've taken away a lot of their adaptive feeding measures by feeding them frozen rodents. I don't feed live. So I mentioned the snake feeds off 3 things: the heat, movement, and smell. My hands are warm and moving, so I don't want them to think that that's food. So through lots of training, lots of over and over, repeating it every single week, we have trained these snakes to only feed off of the smell. Now, when that smell comes in, though, you can't touch the snake. The snakes will actually, if the smell's in the room and I walk past the glass, they'll hit the glass so hard, they'll pop their jaws out of place and they'll injure themselves. So as soon as the smell comes around, all the other natural adaptations come in to help them feed. If you can keep the smell away, a lot of those snakes are very, very friendly, quote unquote. The friendliest snake, I've had to submerge its head in a bucket of water to get it to let go of my hand. And that's the same snake that I have sitting around 5-year-old kids' necks at birthday parties. I do have millions of dollars of insurance. So just in case. You never know. But we have lots of ball pythons because they're a common pet, so we do try to use them as much as we can for our education. Let's see, I know I brought with me the next slide. If you want to go to the next slide, it is one of our native snakes there. So these are corn snakes. So corn snakes come in a lot of different variations. You can see a few of the ones there. The one that has the David copyright on it, that's one that you'd see more in Florida type pattern. They have lots of different patterns. The largest picture there actually is two snakes, a normal morph that I have here with me. And then the lighter colored is actually an albino. Now this snake I took him out to show, and this snake is kind of mid-shed, so it's not as vibrant as that picture would show you on the screen that you can look at in the corner. Not nearly the dark color. They submit like a milky substance that separates their skin. They'll turn a normal color, and then they'll peel their entire skin off of their body, starting from the nose. You can see they have very cloudy eyes there, and that's an indicator that they're shedding. See, constantly sticking out that tongue, using the Jacobson organ. They don't have heat sensing pits, so corn snakes will eat lizards, they'll eat other snakes sometimes, things like that. They do eat birds. Very, very big fans of bird eggs. When I lived in North Fort Myers and I had chickens, and we would get the corn snakes that would slither into the chicken coop, eat the egg. Remember, they could eat very large things. They managed to eat it without breaking it too. And then they would try to leave the chicken coop, but they couldn't because they got stuck. And they need to eat, corn snakes do need to eat a little more often. They'll eat about once a week or so, but compared to that python I showed you, they'll eat much larger meals. The python won't be as apt to eating more frequently. Corn snakes eat much more often in Florida, and that's because corn snakes, they don't have a lot of large animals to prey on in Florida. It's not as common to see large animals like you would have where a lot of pythons are found in the old world, like Africa, Asia, Australia, places like that. One of the adaptations that I think is amazing, but it's also one of the reasons that they're constantly killed by misidentification, is they look kind of like rattlesnakes. They have a similar pattern going down their back. You would call those saddles. So you can see the saddles going down their back, and they've adapted to look like that because rattlesnakes look like that. You know, simply putting it, over time, let's take a native Florida animal, it's two raccoons. If you're a raccoon looking for a meal, and there's rattlesnakes out there, and that you're going for them, you don't get to spread your genetics because you get bit on the face and you get envenomated and you die. But if you're a raccoon that over time learns, do not go for those snakes that have that pattern. Do not go for the snakes that rattle and make that noise. Those raccoons survived more, passed on their genetics more frequently, and those are the raccoons we have. Well, these snakes over time, their color pattern started to mimic rattlesnakes, and they'll even take their tail, which does not have a rattle on it. They'll even take their tail and they'll rattle it in dry leaf litter, and it will sound just like a little pygmy rattlesnake. That's an amazing adaptation to have for most animals except for humans. I can't tell you how many pictures I see and I get of corn snakes cut in half and things like that because people misidentified them as a venomous rattlesnake. Do also want to make the plug that about 90% of venomous snake bites in the United States occur from people trying to interact with that snake in some fashion, trying to catch it, trying to kill it, trying to do something along those lines. So just leave them alone and they'll be fine. Let's see if there's anything else about the rattlesnakes. I think that's really it. I do want to talk about the unique way, since I don't have the next animal, the boa constrictor, with me. But I do want to just make a quick statement that the way snakes can bend and twist and move is an adaptation by having lots of bones. So we as humans have 30, 32, 33, depending what age of our life, because some of our vertebrae start to fuse together. Snakes have between 300 and 400 vertebrae. So one of my favorite things to show the kids is, because I think kids get scared of snakes the way they move, but they're adapted to move this way. Let's see if I can show you on video. You can literally tie them and it doesn't hurt them. The snake, can't talk to me, can't let me know if I was hurting it verbally, but it would turn around and it would bite me, or it would also do another adaptation that snakes have, where they'll actually release a pretty foul smelling musk, worse than poop or pee or anything, and they'll do it all over you if they think that they're threatened. So not biting, not musking, and on top of it, just to make a plug of how well we take care of our animals, you usually don't want to mess around with snakes who are shedding, because they can't see as well. A snake that can't see is never going to be as friendly as a snake that can see. But we've worked a lot with them, and he tolerates us. This is Barry, the corn snake. Barry tolerates us. They don't enjoy our presence, but they will tolerate you if they know that you're not a threat. So let's go to the next one here. The boa constrictors is the next one I believe I've got there. Let's see how well I do in the truck putting everything away while I talk about the boas here. So boa constrictors, being that we're in Florida and we're really sticking more towards Florida, boa constrictors, there's a place called, actually, you all have probably heard of it, called the Deering Estates over there. The Deering Estates over in the Miami area has an actual established population of boa constrictors. Boa constrictors, there's boas and pythons, and they're not the same animals. And for the most part, when you talk about pythons, pythons are an old world animal. They're from Africa, Asia, and Australia. They fill the niche. The role of a big snake is filled by pythons in the old world. In the new world, like the Americas, the role of a big snake is filled by boa constrictors. Most of our boa constrictors were caught somewhere in the wild. About a year and a half ago, 2 Decembers ago, you might have seen, it was all over the news over here in Southwest Florida. There was a big, about 10-foot boa caught at Lehigh Acres area who's going to be euthanized. And we took her in. She's living here happy as can be. If they get out, they will absolutely survive in Florida. They'll thrive in Florida. It's the same type of ecosystem, same type of habitats. But there's a difference between being an invasive animal and being an established invasive animal. And it's the established ones that we really are concerned about. They can become established, a couple boa constrictors, mating with each other, spreading on the genetics. But the likeliness of 2 released pets finding each other in the wild is pretty small. You can make it more difficult by saying they both have to be sexually mature, old enough to breed. And then we can make it even more impossible by saying one needs to be male, one needs to be female. So the chance of them becoming established, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not as likely as a lot of people would think. The Burmese python situation in the Everglades, that occurred really, few different genetic strands are found from that, but that really happened back in Hurricane Andrew in 1992. I was in Fort Lauderdale for that. And I know that somebody down in Miami imported about 1,000 wild Burmese pythons from Southeast Asia about a week before this happened, about a week before Hurricane Andrew hit. And these are, very adapted animals surviving in the wild. They imported them into Florida. I know this because somebody that I was close friends with went over there and purchased some from him. He had about between 700 and 800 of these snakes in one building, basically, and then Hurricane Andrew hit and blew 700 or 800 of the same snakes into one area. That will start a population. Now, if you go online, if you're familiar with this, they will say that's not where it started because we can find multiple genetic strands when we find these Burmese pythons. Other people who had them and they were released and they escaped and things like that. Snakes are great escape artists. Other people who had them, they could have got into that population. But even though they have larger clutches, 60 to 80 eggs, they are going to hatch out about, 15 inches long. We have 27 native species of snakes in the Everglades, and most of them are at some point in their life are going to be 27 inches long. So there's lots of animals who have adapted to eating snakes that size. They can grow to 8 foot in 1 year. They're bigger than most of our snakes. So that's one of the where they can kind of become more of an issue. Other animals, just to make a quick plug, because I think it's a cool little fact, they did study lionfish, super invasive, from New York down to the Caribbean. They're from Asia as well. They studied the genetics of lionfish. There's millions of them. We'll never eradicate them. I'm a spear fisherman. I see them all the time. I shoot them all the time when I'm down in the water. We've studied the genetics of those, and they go back and they found that the lionfish population started from 3 individuals released, probably all from the same exact aquarium. So it can happen, but lionfish also have thousands and thousands of babies a year. It's a big difference. So how they're adapted is going to determine how well they're going to survive in these environments. And they're constantly adapting. They're constantly doing things. They're constantly moving north, a lot of the snakes, because the ones who can't survive more north, they don't. The ones who can, they survive more north. So anything else on so snakes can lay eggs. Snakes can have eggs that are inside of their bodies. They hatch inside their bodies and they come out. And then snakes can also actually have live birth. So one of the adaptations for the eggs either hatching inside of you and coming out or just having live birth is those animals come out ready to defend themselves. If we go back to Mr. Raccoon looking for a meal and you have two snakes, not even a rattlesnake, just a corn snake, let's say, the corn snake sitting there ready to bite you, and the other one, there's an egg, you're going to start capitalizing on the eggs. So fast forward down the road, the live birth animals became more favored. Boa constrictors are viviparous, and actually rattlesnakes. Have you ever heard the word viper? The word viper, all vipers, comes from the two Latin words viva, parus, which literally means live birth. Rattlesnakes are all live bearing animals. So what's safer to eat, an egg or the live baby? So the eggs over time didn't get to pass on. So boa constrictors are the same way. And on the topic of birth, something that's absolutely amazing is they can do something called parthenogenesis, a big word that they call it the Virgin Mary birth. That boa can never come in contact with another boa constrictor in their entire life. They can self-fertilize and have viable offspring. Komodo dragons are known to do that as well. So it's pretty interesting thing to be able to just have babies like that. Ball pythons, just rewinding back, I'm a little flustered. I should have said this earlier. I have a ball python. I have a lot of, we have like 15. I was doing a video on them. They were all together because I didn't finish the video that night. About 10 months later, I had babies. Their gestation incubation is only about 8 months. So that female ball pythons, and a lot of reptiles can do this, they can actually store the male's sperm and decide maybe the environment, maybe there was a big drought that year, maybe there's not enough food, maybe it's a flood, whatever it is, they can decide that the environment's not right. They can store the sperm and they can fertilize when they choose to. She's you call it gravid when a snake holds eggs. That same python, and she hasn't been with another male in almost 2 years, 2.5 years. She's gravid again, so she fertilized herself again. At the Bronx Zoo, there's a 62-year-old ball python, which their average lifespan is 20 to 30 years. Just showing you we don't know how to take care of reptiles just yet. That 62-year-old ball python just had a clutch of eggs, very successful. She hadn't been in contact with a male 17 years. So she stored the male sperm for 17 years. Their adaptations are absolutely amazing. It's mind-blowing, it really is. All right, where are we at? 6:35. Am I stopping still at we said 6:50 for some question and answers? Is that what you
Yeah, that'd be great.
You can do that, and I can hang out if people. We'll start at 6:50. We'll go to 7 for Q&A. But I'll stick around as long as people have questions afterwards. I have no problem.
Perfect.
It's working, so we can scoot on over. Let's get into lizards a little bit here. So there's a few different groups, a couple different groups of lizards. You basically have the regular lizards most people would think of, and then you have what are called worm lizards. In Florida, we have the legless lizards, things like that. That's that top picture, the one with no legs on it. The real big difference is that they're going to have eyelids. Snakes do not have eyelids, and they're also going to have external ears for those lizards. So those adaptations, snakes don't blink their eyes. They have clear scales that go over their eyes. That's why the corn snake I showed you had cloudy eyes. And they also don't have an external ear. Their internal ear is covered with a flap of skin. As far as adaptations are concerned, if you were dragging yourself along the ground through the dirt without having any legs to keep you off of that substrate and debris, you would hope to be adapted the same way, to have, protection over your ears, to have coverings over your eyes. If you think about the smelling as well, if you're down there on the ground, you don't want to smell through your nose. Sticking out their tongue is going to prevent more debris and things like that kind of getting in the different areas. Lizards more so have the legs. Some have adapted, convergent evolution. Some have adapted the same way snakes have to lose their legs, but they haven't lost the external ear opening and the eyelid. So we do have the legless lizards. Some smell with the Jacobson organ. Like I said, that black and white lizard right there is an Argentine black and white tegu. They're a very invasive species in Florida. You all have a lot of them in Miami, and they're big egg eaters, and they're eating crocodile eggs they're finding. So that's one of the kind of big issues with them. So let's jump into, I have a few of the lizards with me here. Let's go to the next slide here. The geckos. I know I brought some of them with. I don't know if you can hear them all bouncing around in here. All right, so leopard geckos. We've got, oops, is mine still working here? Okay.
Yep.
So leopard geckos can be all sorts of different, color morphs, things like that, especially because of the pet trade. This is what you would more commonly find in the wilds. You can see a few of the different color morphs on there. There's like albino morphs, yellows, blizzard morphs, all sorts of things like that. Lots of different color morphs because of the pet trade. Really out in the wild though, just the natural colors that would be that they're adapted for would be the ones that survive. You can see the external ear opening right there. And actually if I somehow, I don't know how I would do it without, popping my light off here that I'm using. I don't know if I could show you. Can you see right through the ear? You can. I don't know if you can see right through their head. You kind of see the ear hole from one side to the other. If you see the ear hole, it's kind of right. Oh, he's like, what are you doing? I don't know if you can see that. It's a pretty unique adaptation to be able to see right through their ear holes of these guys. That's that when they shed their skin, it's a very cool thing. I've only caught it a few times, and we have lots of leopard geckos. I had somebody call me today who is moving and has, I think 20 geckos that they're trying to surrender to us. So if you know anybody who wants to adopt a leopard gecko, we do have an animal adoption program. So I've only seen a few times them actually shedding their skin. I'll see the colors. They'll do the same thing the snake. They'll get an opaque color. But when they shed their skin, they will actually eat their skin. At first, the literature would say it was for nutrients and the lack of nutrient availability where they're from, out in Pakistan, things like that. But they tested the skin, basically saw that it's nutrient, lacking. So now what they're saying is they eat their skin to cover up their trails, so that predators can't find their skin and kind of track down where that gecko would be. Another adaptation for predators is these big tails. The tails, it is where they store their fat and their nutrients, kind of like humps on a camel. But their tails, they will actually take their tail and they'll rattle it, they'll shake it just like this right before they eat. Again, the literature used to say that they did that to distract their prey, but now the literature more favors that they wiggle their tail because right when they're about to eat, they're in a vulnerable state when a predator might go for them, and the tail wiggling looks like a worm, so the predator would bite their tail off instead of biting off their head, and they can regrow their tail. Another cool thing about these, not all lizards, but a lot of lizards are able to regrow their tail. So let me show you, and this did not happen at our rescue. This happened before we got this animal, but I just do want to show you, and you could also see from the bottom picture of that gecko, it's not the same gecko, that's a different one that we have. And compare it to that middle gecko or this one right here, you see all the ridges, the bumps going down their tail. I know that this animal has never dropped its tail because of that, because going all the way down, the vertebrae still continue down the tail. In this area up here, they have, I guess you call it an autonomous vertebrae that they can just drop it on their own. They could even drop it without anybody pulling, just from the stress. So they can drop their tail on their own. The tail regrows, the bones don't regrow. So if you see from that picture on the bottom, let's see if I can show you this one right here. I don't know if I can handle the, to avoid a lizard getting out of my truck and not being able to get it. Let me put this one away. Let me show you just the other one. This is another one that we've had for a little bit of time. They live about 20, 25 years. Actually one of the older living lizards out there. So this one dropped its tail prior to us getting it. This is Fiona. She's a different color, you can see, definitely different, looks a lot different than the one I just showed you. But if you look at her tail, you can see it's very smooth. They feel like velvet at this point. So it's very smooth, did not regrow the vertebrae in it. So you can see different color morphs, very unique, very cool animals. Not really good on the pet trade though. They're not, right now they're actually enjoying it because usually I bring them out at 7 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m. for programs. They're more of a crepuscular animal. They like when the sun is rising and setting, and they're more nocturnal as well. There's less predators out at night for them where they live. So they've adapted to live during those things. Adaptations really basically help you with foraging, finding food, flight, running away, avoiding becoming food, fighting, also, avoiding becoming food or maybe fighting for mating purposes, and then of course reproducing. So basically it has to help you survive and pass on your genetics. If you have an adaptation that if you have something happen, let's say if your genetics, you breed and some unique trait happens, and it's a mutation, it's called a mutation if it's unique amongst you. And I know the movie X-Men makes us think of mutations as this horrible thing, but that mutation, if it helps with the feeding, reproducing, those types of things, it can be passed on to the next generation. And then over time, that mutation essentially becomes an adaptation. So if you want to go to the next slide here, it's pretty, let's see, I should be on the bearded dragons here. All right, so bearded dragons. This is Figment. Scroll over here. So Figment came to us. These people, they didn't have him in his proper light. He does need the sun to stay active. He needs about 115-degree basking area, which is proving very difficult right now. We have multiple generators running. I don't know if you hear them in the driveway. We're going through about 100 gallons of fuel a week, at least, if not probably twice that next week. So giving them that 115-degree basking area. They didn't give him the right heat. They didn't give him the right light from the sun. He's a diurnal, a daytime animal. So he needs that vitamin D3 to properly use calcium. They didn't give him that. And because of that, he ended up getting MBD, a metabolic bone disease. Leopard geckos, they don't need vitamin D3 because they're not out when the sun is out. So they haven't adapted to needing that. So they didn't take care of Figment the right way, but we got him and he's doing really well. So one of my favorite adaptations of all animals, really, and think of a Florida animal that has it. How about an iguana? They're not a Florida animal, but they're all over Florida. I just saw multiple today when I was in Fort Lauderdale. They have on top of their head, that's what's circled in that smaller picture next to unique adaptations on that slide. It's a pineal eye. It's a third eye. So let's see if Figment allows me to turn him around. He probably won't. It's just in the middle of that circle. Nope, he's not gonna let me. So that's why the picture's on there to see. It's so small. It looks like you just took the little tip of a pencil and put it on a piece of paper. The third eye, it doesn't blink or move like ours does, but it senses changes in light and motion, which is a great adaptation to have if your number one predators come from the sky. In Australia, where they live, their number one predator is a kookaburra. They don't just eat the gum trees, they feed on bearded dragons. They love eating these guys. So you see, naturally adapted to live in that area, good colors to live in those deserts. Spikes, just like cactuses have spikes, they're adapted to survive with low amounts of moisture, predators, things like that. They have spikes to help protect them in the environments that they live. All right, let's keep scrolling through. I know I keep flying through these. Got lots of let's get into the turtles a little bit here. Put Figment away. So if I didn't have the rescue, I didn't have the animals weren't taken in. If I didn't do this for a living, I probably would still have my tortoises. I'm not gonna lie, mainly because I have the space for them. The main ones that we have, the bottom left corner that has the white text over it, African sulcatas. We have 10 of those right now. About 1,500 pounds total of them. They live over 100 years. They weigh hundreds of pounds. They're just a really not good animal in general as far as a pet, which is why we get them. One of my favorite things about them, because you don't really get much of human traits out of most animals at all, is the tortoises will actually come over to you for shell scratches. So the reason I'm saying that is if you look at these pictures, turtles do not live inside of their shells. Turtles are their shells. You can see that over time, their spine and their ribs have fused together to form that that plate. They can feel it. They're very sensitive on it. If you scratch them, they wiggle back and forth. And I always like to include personal stories if I can. I'm not proud to say that I do have to once a month pay to have somebody, pest control, come out and fog my property for the mosquitoes where we live. Not at all for me. Born and raised Floridian, I'm used to it. I've got natural face protection. But turtles will be covered in the mosquitoes because where they're naturally from, they would bury down in burrows and get away from the mosquitoes. I can't let them dig burrows here because they'll collapse because the amount of rain that we get and where the water table sits. So because of that, they end up getting covered in these mosquitoes. And even though if you look up a video of African tortoises trying to be eaten by lions, you would see lions not successfully biting through those big tortoise shells, but mosquitoes can bite right through their shells all day. And I imagine it's very, very, very irritating for them. So mosquito will bite them right through their shells. It's kind of an interesting thing. So let's go to, let's see, and go to the next slide with the turtle characteristics there. Nostrils on the top of their heads. You can see that snapping turtle, they use it kind of as a snorkel as they're down there. Neck retraction. The only turtles that can't retract their necks into their side of their shells as a whole are going to be your sea turtles. And then snapping turtles also really can't pull their heads inside of their shells. And there's actually a whole group of animals that pull their heads in sideways. A whole nother thing that I can talk about with turtles. They have beaks, they don't have teeth. And of course, inner ears. Imagine swimming around, having openings. That wouldn't be a good adaptation to have. Let's jump to the next turtle here. I have one with me. Let me get him out very carefully here. Let me think what I should put on my lap. Let me put a towel on my lap because this turtle's probably going to pee all over me. That's like the worst part of the job. I get peed on, pooped on. I do get scratched and bit all the time. If you were to look, you probably can't see my fingers have scratched up, and I've got scars and scrapes all over me, but that's okay. So here's a common snapping turtle. Let's see, this is one of our native Florida turtles. So Florida does have more native turtles than any other state, 37 native species of turtles to our state. A lot of them are going to share same characteristics, but some of the characteristics are going to be a little different. Snapping turtles have incredible jaw strength. You're going to notice probably, I'm a little close in the video, I'm not holding this turtle to the sides. I have my fingers in between his back legs, my thumb on the back of his shell. Snapping turtles feed, they have a really long neck. I don't know if I can see if I can show you how long his, see how long he stretches his neck out. Look how close he gets to my finger. See how long, there it goes. That's where their necks, or their name Serpentina, comes from, that long snake-like neck to them. They have these things called tubercles to help them camouflage all around their head to look kind of naturally like plants. But they feed by having a really long neck. They wait for the fish to come by and they shoot their head out and they grab that fish. The alligator snapping turtle has a little lure for a tongue that it will wiggle. So let me show you right here. So I'm going to take out the next turtle as well, just to show you how turtles are adapted slightly differently. Just because, like that corn snake we had earlier, they live in forest ecosystems and they're going to be very adapted for climbing high up in the trees. If you went into a forest, I would be shocked if you saw a deer up in the trees. Even though they live in forest habitats, ecosystems, they're not up in the trees. Even though all turtles, freshwater turtles, live in water, they don't live in the same areas of the water. They don't hunt the same things. So if I took out, just show you one of our native turtles. This is a heck of multitasking in here. So this is a yellow belly slider. I'm hold them different so I don't get a bit here. So this is a native yellow belly slider, native to Florida. So one of the things you'll see is the snapping turtle doesn't have nearly as webbed feet as the yellow belly slider. Snapping turtles are actually pretty poor swimmers. They actually prefer to live in very shallow water. So these ones have very, very, very webbed feet, helps them swim through the water very quickly. But if you can see here, see how close, how I can show you this without getting, look at the bottom of their shells there. Do you see how much meat is showing on the bottom of the snapping turtle? That allows them to get their legs underneath them because they're actually a turtle that walks through the water. They're not good swimmers. Whereas this turtle, the bottom of their shell is completely full. That's an adaptation to keep them more hydrodynamic in the water, allowing them to swim through because they don't need to walk in the water. They both live in aquatic habitats, but they're adapted differently for their aquatic habitats. So we'll put the snapping turtle away. We could go to the next slide, which should be red ear sliders. Beautiful. So red ear sliders are adapted to live in a lot of places, unfortunately. They have a very broad niche. They're actually invasive on every continent on Earth except for Antarctica, but there's no reptiles or really any animals on Antarctica. So the problem with the red ear sliders is they're not really from Florida in this area. They got to Florida and they basically fill the same niche as the yellow belly sliders fill in these areas. Let me show you the red ear sliders that we've got here. Scroll my screen so I can see myself here. There we go. So this is a red ear slider. I don't know if I'll get to stick his head out and you'll see the little bit of the red coming out there, but they're very invasive. The reason they're so invasive and they're found all over Earth, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. After that started to come out, over 1 million of these were imported every single year. Let me show you on them while I've got the video up. So tortoises, when they're on land, have an adaptation. The bottom of their shell indents like a bowl, upside down bowl. So when tortoises mate on land, the male's able to position himself on the female with that bowl holding him there. If an aquatic turtle had the bottom of their shell like that, it would affect the way that they swim. So they don't have the bowl belly on them. Instead, the males are going to have very long tails. So let's see here if I could show you. The bigger turtle is going to have a much smaller tail. See the tail there? It stops right about their little tiny tail. Look at the size of that tail. Even though he's half the size, if that, his tail is probably 5 times as big as the female's tail. He's going to tuck underneath and help him mate. And you're also going to see if I can show you, see her fingernails. See how short or how long her fingernails are. And if you compare it to the males, look how long the male fingernails are. So a lot of aquatic turtles, the males have long fingernails and a very long tail to help them hold on and mate with that female. It allows them to pass on their genetics. And I mean, the female cannot really want to mate. If that male is adapted and he's strong enough to mate, he's going to pass on those genetics. So let me show you real quick, because I did bring one with me. We're going to end on this. So if a mutation happens that's not favorable, I know I'm a little bit, we did start a little late though. If a mutation happens that's not favorable, it doesn't get passed on. So I said these animals are see you later bye animals. A red ear slider, if it has 20 eggs in a clutch, it'll be lucky if one of those babies survives to become an adult. When they hatch out, they're about as big as the tip of my top half of my thumb, right about there. Very small. Everything eats them, even though they're adapted to survive. You know, birds looking down into the water, they struggle to see them from the top because they have a dark color. But then something like a snapping turtle who might eat a baby turtle, as it swims over them and they're looking to the brighter sky, they have a light belly. It's called counter shading. So they have special counter shading. Most aquatic animals have that, sharks, whales, dolphins. All these special adaptations, 1 out of 20 might survive when they're naturally colored. If a mutation happens and a trait comes out that won't favor you in nature, you just won't survive. So this is also a red ear slider. This is an albino red ear slider. Albino animals are very rare to see in the wild. And if you see them, majority of the time, it's going to be one of your type 3 animals, which if you remember from that first slide are the ones that offer a lot of parental care. I've seen whales, dolphins. I've seen different pictures of mammals that are albino, but that's because their parents take care of them. You can have animals that are albino and reptiles in the wild, but it's very rare. So if you were picturing, a dark area, a lake or canal in Florida, more of the colors of my shirt, you can clearly see which one of these you're going to find first. So that color trait, not going to favor them in the wild. The albino went away. There's a very famous study referencing colors and things like that. They did it on moths near an industrial plant. And basically, long story short, is the the moths were white and they lived on trees that were white. When the industrial plant came in, slowly over time, it turned the trees around black in color. And over time, all those moths turned black because that's the color they needed to be adapted to live in that area. Pretty cool stuff. So I think we're at the alligators and the crocodilians now. All right, so crocodilians. So we did reference earlier, and I'm talking adaptations, and I know I'm short on time, but just to make the plug again, is these are 3 separate families of your crocodilians. They are all crocodilians. They're in the same order, crocodilians, but they're in separate families. Remember I said the feline is family. Another family would be canines. They're both in the order of Carnivora, so the order of carnivores. And you have felines and canines. You compare alligators and crocodiles to each other, it's like comparing a cat and a dog. They're in different families. They really are. They're drastically different from one another. Alligator attacks are very infrequent. If they happen, it usually because of us. Most of them, if they happen, they don't eat the person because alligators over time haven't adapted to eating large animals. If they sat there waiting for a large animal, they didn't get as much energy as the ones who capitalize on fish and raccoons and birds and things like that. So the ones who capitalize on small meals are the ones who got to pass on their genetics over and over. Run over to Australia, saltwater crocodiles, big mammals there, are big animals, big meals. They eat large animals. Nile crocodiles in Africa, you've seen them eating zebras and buffalo on all those documentaries. They're adapted for eating large animals. Alligators attack and kill on average about 1 person a year. Those 2 crocodiles I just named, the Nile and saltwater crocodiles, attack, kill, and consume 3 people every single day. Big difference between the 2 of them, like really big difference. We're also in different areas and different countries and things like that. And I understand developed versus undeveloped, there's different factors that go into that. But I do just want to make that plug with them. My alligator license in Florida requires me, there's a class 2 license, which is like a wolf or a bobcat. A crocodile is a class 1, which is like a tiger or a bear. So let me I don't really think how to get the alligator out. I didn't want to take his mouth because I want to show you his teeth. Give me 1 sec. Let's see if I can do this here successfully. The back seat requires a bigger bin. All right. I got to get this recording. This is good. All right. This is Talk. We have Tick and Talk, our American alligators. Now, I did say I run their animal rescue, and I do want to say most people say it's a rescue, but I got them from an alligator farm. That license that I have, hear him, he's hissing. The license that I have, hear him, I don't know if you can. He's hissing, he's upset. Because again, he shouldn't be around a large animal like me. If he didn't defend himself and was like, okay, huge animal, pick me up. Your genetics don't get passed on. It's very simple kind of concept to think about. If you really kind of get into it. He's struggling. He's got a lot of leverage in here that I normally don't have. I'm standing freely, so he's going to push around a little bit. Let me get a better grip. So American alligators. So where do you even start? They're one of my favorite animals around. I've been around them my entire life. They have incredible adaptations, ancestors dating back 230 million years. Snakes and lizards are in the same group. They're called squamates, squamata. Now, even though these look like a lizard, and yes, they have 4 legs and the tail and all that, they are not. A lizard is more related to a snake than it is related to any crocodilians. When the Spanish got here, they saw them and they said, the lizard, the lizard, the lizard. The biggest lizard I've ever seen, El Lagarto. And over time, El Lagarto became alligator, and that's where their name comes from. Even their name, even crocodilians, comes from the Greek word crocodilos, which also means lizards. But they are not lizards, and they have some incredible adaptations, much different than lizards. When they're younger, they have yellow stripes going down their bodies, and that's to help camouflage them. Lots of things eat small alligators, even with the parents protecting them for up to a few years, which is very unique for reptiles. They lose their teeth thousands of times. When they're younger, their teeth are much sharper. That's because they don't have the same jaw pressure as the older ones who have very dull teeth on them. The alligator closes its mouth you're only going to see the upper row of teeth. Where that indent is right there, something called a fourth tooth pocket. Open up here, show you those fourth pockets on the roof of the mouth. See them right inside of my fingers, one right there and one right there. That's the fourth tooth pocket. So the alligators close their mouth, that big bottom tooth right there, that fourth tooth end fits inside of that pocket. So you're not going to see the upper and lower row. I say this because in Miami, you actually have both of them. So South Florida, the only place in the world you can see alligators and crocodiles coexisting with one another. They have built-in goggles. See if I can show you his clear eyelid. It's going to go from the front to the back. Let's see. I don't know if I can get him to do it. It's called a nictitating membrane. And honestly, I don't know if he has it on. He might have it on already. You watch, he'll pull it off. He's still wearing it. It's slowly coming from the back. It's peeling forward. Just wait for it. Come on, buddy. I swear it's there. Even cats kind of have a leftover one. See it slowly kind of coming over. While we're here, that little slit behind their eye right there is their ear. And then, of course, nostrils on the top of their head. So when they're sitting, looking in the water, kind of see it slowly starting to peel off there. How perfect. So when they're sitting in the water and all you see is their eyes, nose, and their ears, they've got their sight, they've got their smell, and they've got their hearing. If you take the inches between the nose and their eyes and just change the word inches to feet, that's about how long they're going to be. So if you're questioning how big they are, that's how long they're going to be. Every bump going down their back is called an osteoderm, a little bony plate that helps protect them from animals and things that want to eat them. It also helps with temperature regulation, helps them warm up. See any of the They can go months between meals. They can eat a large meal, go a long time in between. They also, like I said, offer parental care. This is kind of cool that the alligators know this. So alligators will keep the babies for up to about 3 years. And the reason I say up to is that's going to depend on how successful the following years are. So if she has a successful clutch this year, 2022, we'll call it, 2023 comes, those babies from 22 are maybe about a foot long. They grow about 1 foot per year until 5 years. So a 4-foot gator is about 4 years old. 2024 comes, the 2022 babies are about 2 feet. That's okay still. Not going to pose a threat to 2024's babies. Now, if she is successful again, 2025, 2022 babies are going to be 3 foot long, big enough to eat her babies, and she's going to run the bigger alligators from 2022 off. If she doesn't have a successful clutch for whatever reason, she'll let the 3-footers kind of stick around and continue to protect them. Only protection from the day they hatch out of their eggs. Not a single piece of food is going to be given from that alligator to the babies. They are reliant on hunting on their own. Webbed feet. They survive cold. They can push their nose through the first layer of frozen ice in a lake, let the water freeze around them, cut all the blood off to their limbs, called shunting, pump the blood in the main core of their body, just letting their heart beat just a few times a minute, and survive through the winter months. We mentioned counter shading. Remember, light bellies, dark tops. That's important for all your aquatic animals. They go through thousands of teeth in their lifetime, like I said. Just trying to cover the ones here. So they have 5 toes in the front, and they have 4 toes on the back. The outer 2 toes on the front don't have toenails. See, the other 3 do. And on the back, just that outer one, I'll show you better, doesn't have a toenail. That's an adaptation because they're actually going to sit in the water and spread their legs out around them and wait for things to bump in. Just like our nails are not alive and they don't have feeling, their outer toes are going to be more sensitive without the nails, and they wait for things to swim by them. Usually an alligator is going to hunt by swinging its head to the left or the right and grabbing fish in the water, versus what you see on TV with the ambushing, with much lower chance of grabbing something from the front versus the sides. Fish are much more, loaded with nutrients and calories, and something, like a 4-foot great blue heron that averages like 3.5 pounds. So that's not nearly as nutritious for these alligators, but it's a heck of a lot more entertaining to watch on National Geographic. So that's what we see on TV. But that's not how they're adapted to eat. And the last, I know there was one I passed on the alligators. Oh, I won't be able to show you. They don't really ever come out, but you can see there's a pocket there. There's one on each side of this alligator. something comes out, looks like a small, I guess you call like a little like a piece of a broccoli, it looks like. These are called gular glands. So if I had to guess, back in the day, these were glands that they emit hormones, alligator hormones, to let others know when it's time to mate. One of them mutated in a weird way, and the hormones started to more mimic fish hormones instead of the alligator hormones. Well, then those fish came around thinking it's time to reproduce, and the alligator got a really easy meal real fast. Well, they got more food, more energy, more genetics passed on. Fast forward down the road, these gular glands emit hormones very, very, very similar, and they replicate fish hormones. So they could actually, emit smell into the water and call their food right over to them if they want. Very unique adaptation as well. I think there's really, this is the last, you can pass over the alligator den one. I just want to show that last one on the, I think what is it, the alligator holes. One more, the dens are. So I took that picture down in the Fakahatchee Strand in the Everglades. So alligators are a keystone species. That last stone you put in the big archway, it's called the keystone. Even though it's so small compared to the entire arch, you pull that little piece out, everything crumbles. Keystone species, a lot of other animals rely on them, and they dig that picture you're looking at with all those birds and the water looks like it's bubbling. They dig alligator holes in the Everglades that over 100 different species rely on, not even use. There's hundreds that use them, rely on these alligator holes for their water, for their food source, for things like that. Wood storks are a big one. They need, I know it's a bird station. They need, very specific water depths. Because we have all these canals in Florida, we're seeing less and less of these alligator holes. So these animals are not having what they're naturally adapted for out there. So I think the last one on the alligator holes, as far as the alligators go. So there, I always, when I'm with the kids, and I always talk in general when I usually end with the alligators. Just we hear so much bad stuff on TV about how we're hurting the environment, we can't bounce back and things like that. And although we have done all those things, it's not going to help. It's really, really not. We need to focus on the positive things. And alligators, 1967, they were talked about as an endangered species. Didn't do anything until 73 when the Endangered Species Act came out, which was co-written by a Floridian, what was said to protect alligators, only about 30,000 left. We protected them, we made different laws, things like that. And now there's so many alligators in Florida that we can legally hunt them. I don't do it myself, but I fully support licensed and permitted alligator hunting. So we can do it. That's 50 years. We've seen it with a lot of birds, since DDT. We've seen it with the alligators. We can do it with a lot of these animals. We have to know that we can do it and focus on the positive. So we can save alligators and have them around. We can save all the different animals, but it really just starts with the education. So it starts with you all being here, your support, just being here for this this virtual program helps us continue our efforts to caring for all the different animals that we have. Like I said, 52 different species, over 150 animals. And I really, really care for them. I not to go into the depth of it, because honestly, I can't talk about the hurricane too much because I honestly get all choked up, and I don't ever cry. I ran down in the middle of the hurricane because I knew the reptile room blew out. I was running with animals. We had a storm surge. It was chaos. It really, really was. But everybody's doing all right. Everybody's good. And your being here helps me continue to care for these animals. So you can all feel a little bit better tonight for being here. Tell your friends. Make sure you tell Pelican Harbor at Seabird Station that you want to have me back out for one of the many other programs that I offer. And I promise I'll be more on time and not run so late and be a little more put together. I haven't had power for like 2 weeks, and things are a little much right now. So appreciate your patience. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And yes, I will. If anybody has questions about anything that I have, anything in general, and make sure that you at least get from one of the slides, you get my website on there. Although I can't really get as many emails right now, service is getting better out here. And I'd love to say I get so many emails, so much business. Probably 25% of the emails I get is a picture, usually kind of blurry, of what's this snake? What's this? And so I'm so happy to identify different animals for you to answer any questions that you may have. If you're ever on Southwest Florida, Pine Island, once we get a little more repaired, come out for a private tour. I did the day before the hurricane on Tuesday, I closed on a a larger property right next door, about 9 acres, because I was opening a public facility, but that's going to be delayed for a while because I've got a lot of down trees. So Australian pines, gotta love them. Brought here for wind control, but they come down. So yes, we could ask questions. I'll keep the alligator out. If there's any other ones you want me to bring out that you want to see again, we can do that. But I'll finally stop talking.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. I know I learned a lot. It was super interesting. So many different adaptations there that I had never heard about, never knew. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You can also go ahead and drop them in the chat and we can ask Adam.
I have a couple questions. Most importantly, though, before I ask like animals related stuff, for donations, do you guys take any Missouri? I know because you're saying you have tortoises and turtles.
Yeah, I actually lost about 150 pounds of brand new food during the storm surge. We get 6 different Missouri pelleted diets: the low starch tortoise, the regular tortoise, herbivore, insectivore, crocodilian, and aquatic turtle are the ones that we use for our reptiles. So any of those 6 we absolutely can use.
Okay.
Yeah.
We actually sent out a ton to our friends that have reptiles themselves. So
nice. I like Missouri a lot. It's a good, it's a good fortified diet. When you have so many things, it's a good way to make sure they're getting all of their nutrients. But we supplement our stuff. We go through like 10,000 bugs a week here, so they get all sorts of things as well.
Cool. So I'll ask my parents about that. As for some questions, I always considered parthenogenesis as more of a phenomenon. You're saying with reptile buzz, it occurs. Is it a lot, or is it more just like a rare?
So that's going to be a much newer thing that they're studying more and more. Komodo dragons was one. The boa constrictor one was just, I think, within the last 2 years that they showed it. And being honest, I have it on my ever-growing to-do list, but 17 years is a very long time for that the ball python to store that sperm. So I did want to follow up because I would think that they would have looked into it, because then they'll be able to test the babies and see if their genetics match. Because that is the thing I didn't mention, might have mentioned it, but that's the disadvantage of parthenogenesis, is there are going to be genetic matches. So reptiles can breed to siblings and relatives and things because their genetics aren't as complicated as humans. We can't do that. It doesn't work. It just does not work. So the parthenogenesis in the ball pythons, I think that might be the case, but we're not sure exactly. And I think because it's genetics within the last few years have really got very solid in their studies, very statistically, and the t-tests and ANOVAs, they're very, very good with all the different studies. So I think we're going to start to see much more parthenogenesis in reptiles. But I will say parthenogenesis is, I would say it's not a phenomenon in a lot of your invertebrates. A lot of insects are known for their parthenogenesis. So maybe in reptiles it is, who knows? But we'll see where the studies go here soon. Great question.
And then just 2 more. Yeah. Brain. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so what's the difference between osteoderms and scoops?
Same thing. Same thing.
Okay.
Great question. So osteoderms, just the fancier way to say it, I guess. Versus the scoops. Same thing. The little bony plates. Osteoderm. Yeah, same thing. Very good.
And then the sulcata that you put in your PowerPoint, was that yours? Because the lack of pyramiding was phenomenal.
Well, I don't remember which one honestly was in there, but the problem, I can't take credit. I'd love to say yes, it's absolutely what we get them in. We rarely get anything as babies. It's very uncommon for somebody to get something and then just give it away. So we get things pretty well into their lives a lot of the times. So they would have had them beforehand with the different pyramiding. So we have some that are very pyramided. We have some that are smooth as can be. And I'll tell you, my mind is always getting changed. I picked up a couple sulcatas who are very large, over 100 pounds. And I'm going to put a paper out with one of my friends. I'm going to call it super pyramiding. Their shells are flawless and smooth, but they're like twice the height as my 40-year-old tortoise is. And when I picked them up, I asked what the diet was. And I said, so what do they eat? She goes, well, for their morning meal, they get, and proceeds to tell me about monkey biscuits, too much protein. Every day they get corns of cob, which like no animal should eat corn, and bananas and all these different things that if I would have known that from all the literature I've ever read, 5, 6, 8 years of that kind of diet would have killed them. They're smooth, flawless. They look healthy. I'm not saying if we got a cross cut of that shell, it wouldn't look very porous, things, very damaged, but they look great. So we get them at all sorts of ages, and we kind of, that's out of our control a lot. It's also one of the, I will say, probably one of the toughest parts of my job and what I do is not knowing how old they are. When reptiles go to at the end of their life, they just kind of stop eating. They just don't do anything. They kind of just die. When my animals stop eating, I don't know how old they are, and I'll get like high calorie insectivore diet. I'll be shoving tubes down their throat, trying to tube feed them, get them going. And some animals have bounced back, and some animals just continue to slow and then just die. And do I stress them out at their old age, or do I try to get them? And there's nobody's going to give me an answer for that, because there is no answer for that. One of those tough things. Shouldn't have to make that decision. People shouldn't get these as pets in the first place if they're not ready. Especially a tortoise, the oldest licata, Timothy, with real record, not anecdotal. The oldest licata that I remember reading about was like 172 or 168 or something. That's why is that legal? Why do you need an animal that gets that old? Better hope my kids want that animal. So, I brought them in the wintertime when I lived in North Fort Myers, and I had one push itself pretty far into my drywall, so they'll walk into your next room even if you close the door. They're destructive.
Thank you so
So
much.
yeah, I think tangented a lot on that, but I think you got the answer there.
Thank you.
Awesome. Those are great questions. We have a question in the chat about what are the biggest threats of the common yet invasive green iguanas?
So this one it's an interesting question, because depending on what level that you look at things from, it's all relative. A mosquito bugs us, but then a frog loves to eat a mosquito. So from which aspect? From a human aspect, the threats from iguanas a lot of the times is I would say the most expensive things they do is they dig out right along seawalls. They dig holes, and then when the rains come in, it floods out the seawalls and they collapse. And at least when I rented, because I remember my landlord was upset 7 years ago when our seawall collapsed. Insurance doesn't cover your seawalls, and those are very, very expensive. Something that I hear a lot about the iguanas is, oh, how big of a problem are they? All they do is eat plants. Well, first off, that's not true. They're documented eating bird eggs, which shouldn't happen. And even if it was true, those are plants that our native herbivores and omnivores should have access to, that they're not having access to. And I get the rebuttal of, oh, but a lot of times they're just eating the exotic plants. Okay, well, then they're eating the exotic plants. They're walking around wherever they're going. They're pooping out those seeds, and whatever percentage, depending on what plants, different percentages survive through the digestive tracts. Then they're essentially spreading invasive plants around that they shouldn't be spreading around. So I would say from many human aspects, they're very expensive, very damaging. I will say that you're never going to find an iguana in the heart of the Everglades. They're not going to survive. They're going to survive in more, human influence type habitats. So I don't think they're really displacing a heck of a lot of animals that we think about. Remember earlier, we think about only that 3%. We think about all the vertebrate animals, the mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds, fish. I'm sure that they're eating plants, native or invasive, either way, that a lot of our bees might need those plants, for pollen, things like that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of ripples effects from them. And the iguanas, it's not so much an individual iguana that they're as concerned about, should I say. It's going to be the iguanas as a whole. If you've ever driven down from Miami down to the Keys at the right time of the day, I mean, they're everywhere. There's somebody on the East Coast that has, I think, 20-something 20-something trucks, I think 6 locations throughout South Florida. And they go out and they trap and they hunt and they kill the iguanas. And he brings in like 1,000 pounds of iguanas every week. constantly over and over. From another perspective, just because it's always interesting, I have seen videos of charter guides, like a fishing guide. You go out to get the fish. I've seen charter guides on the East Coast that bring you around in flats boats along the seawalls and stuff, and you actually go out hunting iguanas, and it's like alligator hunts. You make money, and it brings ecotourism into Florida. So although they're destructive, people are paying money to come here and hunt them. They're banned though now, so iguanas are prohibited. I have a very special license for iguanas. I'm grandfathered. Burmese pythons, iguanas, Nile monitors, tegus. It's a grandfathered license. You could have all the money you want. You can't have that license unless you're grandfathered into it. Big spike in them right after that law passed, but I think everybody's short-sighted a lot with the reptiles, unfortunately. Down the road, 30, 40 years down the road, it is going to be super helpful. It really will be.
Fantastic. Very well said.
Thanks.
Does anybody else feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat, and we can have Adam answer any more of your questions.
I'm so happy this turned out so well.
Yes, I know. Thank you again. You got everybody, everybody in their little travel cages.
Yeah, I mean, I threw them in. I really did. I pulled in the driveway right when I sent you the text. I mean, my normal 2.5 hour trip from the East Coast took 4.5 hours or something like that. They're stopping. They're doing all sorts of line work out here, and it's crazy. Yeah, and on the East Coast, because I had to go to the East Coast to get supplies, because all of our stores over here, there's no extension cords, there's nothing at all, and I can survive no problem. I'll sleep in my truck. I'll sleep in the house with no air conditioning, but it's the animals that really need the care. So that's what we've been dedicating to. And I do apologize for talking so much and going, I guess, a little overly zealous with some of these questions. I've canceled all my programs that were in person just because I have an endless amount of work. I've got, I think, 5 or 6 people coming out tomorrow just to chop and move trees off the property. We have, if it was daytime and I showed you video, you'd see. But I mean, so I was really excited to get on here and talk about the animals and talk about what I do. And it's been too long since I've been here. So I promise, bring it back for another presentation. I'll do better to stick on topic. I'll do better to make sure the presentation is the topic you chose. So.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad everybody enjoyed it.
All right, everybody.